Hello, and welcome to the Coach Right podcast, where we explore how to turn coaching expertise into published pages. I'm your host, Helen O'Neill, portfolio career specialist, author, and creator of Coach Right, the writing space and program specifically designed for coaches. You can get the episode show notes and your free guide to publishing options at coachright.co.uk. I'll see you for the next chapter. Welcome to the Coach Right podcast. Helen here, recording on Saturday, the 15th of August, 2026, and this is episode 35. I'm still riding high after delivering yesterday's Coach Right workshop on mindset, manuscript, and momentum. I'm always humbled by people who attend these sessions, and yesterday was no different. I had a couple of niggles ahead of this one. First, I was a bit nervous about running a session right in the heart of the summer holidays, but I needn't have worried. Loads of amazing coaches joined me live, and I've already had messages from people to say they've watched the replay. So, phew. And the second thing, I debated for a while before I put it out there whether to do a mindset-orientated session at all. We're often told to focus on the business and the bucks. But I listened to my audience, who told me that the mindset piece was the piece they wanted to hear about. So I'm glad I asked the question, and I'm grateful for the feedback. What both of these things remind me of, and hopefully do for you too, is that just because there's a perceived wisdom doesn't necessarily mean it's true. Were there people that signed up for the recording knowing that they were away? Yes. And a lot of them sent me lovely messages beforehand, and we had a chat, which for a tool that is intended to build connection is exactly the point. And would people be interested in a business-focused session? I'm sure they would, and I will absolutely do one of those in the future. So watch this space. The other thing to note was that there was no big bang hustly launch at the end of the session, simply an invitation for those that were ready to come and work with me to book a call and see if I'm the right book coach for them. That's an open invitation to anyone listening who's a coach on a path to publication, and see if I can support, whether through programs, one-to-one, or even if you've just got a whole load of questions and a 90-minute session to run through strategy is all you need. All the details for those services are on the website, so if you're interested, I'll pop the link in the show notes. Today's guest is Claire Fitzsimmons, and we're talking all about her book, If Lost, Start Here. There was a lot to reflect on following our conversation. We talked about the importance of Analogue in a digitally overstimulated world, and both of us have very similar thoughts on the incredible value that technology brings and the importance of being purposeful about using tools rather than falling down that interminable scroll hole. One of the other things that I really loved about the conversation with Claire was towards the end when we were discussing how we can support independent craft makers and business owners. Claire used the word magical when describing how we reminisce about going to the shop and speaking to the shopkeeper and having that moment of connection. As we digitize our lives and make our purchases online, we lose the opportunity for those micro connections. The one-click buy is convenient, but not very special. Choosing to support the artisan maker, the independent shop, the independent author gives us an opportunity to redress that, and I know is something that I value. In personal news, I've pivoted slightly with my cover design, which was proving to be quite difficult to tie down with the original designer. Unfortunately, they just weren't able to deliver against the brief, and so I launched a contest on 99 designs. I've never worked with them before, so wasn't sure what to expect. I put a brief up, making sure I was clear about the different formats of the cover I needed, ebook, paperback and hardback for Amazon and Ingram Spark. The contest told me to expect about 30 designs in the 5 days it would be open. 24 hours later, I had 200 concepts. I have no doubt that that volume is because I selected to allow AI being used in the design. Remember, this is non-fiction. I'm looking for simple, clear, single motif designs. I did get a couple of messages from people telling me not to do that, which I duly deleted. So with 200 options, I closed the contest early. and selected a design. And after a bit of back and forth over minor adjustments, the cover is complete, which means that I have now sent out my advanced reader copies and will be getting proof copies ordered this weekend ahead of the launch on the 1st of October. The 2027 planner, Plan Your Portfolio, is officially live and selling well on Amazon, and the free PDF version is also available on the website. Turns out there are quite a few keen beans out there already thinking about next year, and I've been asked whether I'd consider running a planning workshop. The short answer is yes. If enough people would find that useful, I'm thinking a half-day virtual session would probably be the way to go in around November time. If you think that you'd be interested in that, no obligation at all. I'm just gauging interest. Drop me a quick email, helen@coachright.co.uk, and if there is enough interest, I will make it happen. I've also been a guest on a podcast recently on the Fabulous Coach's Journey podcast. I've been a listener of the show since the very beginning. I discovered it when I was doing my coach training, and I think they were at about episode 10 at the time. So I went right back to the beginning and listened to every single show. I've always appreciated Robbie Swale's approach and the host team he built around him. Alex Swallow conducted my interview and made being on the other side of the process super easy. Sadly, the show is coming to an end, so I just sneaked in as one of the final guests. It was such a brilliant conversation, and if you'd like to have a listen, please do. Again, more links in the show notes. In the AI bit, everybody is still talking about AI detectors, and I wasn't going to dwell on that today until I heard the news that Anthropic, who own Claude, my current AI of choice, have announced that they are introducing watermarks to their outputs. This will be invisible, but will travel with anything that is copy and pasted. This has come about because of transparency requirements in the EU's AI Act. So whereas until now we've had an honour system, closely followed by a checking process, now there is an additional level. Think of that what you will. I'd like to thank everyone who reached out to congratulate me on reaching a year of the podcast. It has flown by and I love every minute of it. I'm so pleased you find it useful and appreciate the consistency. If you enjoy the show and would like to support it in a small way, we now have a Patreon where you can get early access and questions for reflection for less than the price of a coffee a month. Head to patreon.com/coachright. Right, that's enough from me. It's time for the interview with Claire. It's time for the next chapter. My guest today is Claire Fitzsimmons, co-founder of If Lost Starts Here. Her work is centred on a simple belief: we don't need to fix ourselves to move forwards. Through coaching, writing, workshops, and her podcast, A Thought I Kept, Claire helps people navigate their emotions, reconnect with themselves, and life's more challenging moments with greater self-trust and clarity. She's the co-creator of If Lost Starts Here, a wellbeing journal and guide to navigating life's moments. Welcome to the show, Claire.
It's so lovely to be here. Hi, Helen.
Hi. I'm very much looking forward to our conversation this morning. And if you can start by telling us all about you and your path to publication.
I'd love to. Thank you so much for having me, making the space to discuss the book. It's one of my most favorite things to do right now. So the book is If Lost Start Here. It's a wellbeing journal for the anxious, disconnected, and the uncertain. And I have long wanted to write a book. That's just how my brain defaults to book ideas, wanting to write about subjects, wanting to connect with people through words. And we had this very wiggly path to get there. We is Amanda Sheeren, who's this extraordinarily talented illustrator, who also has a psychology background. So we started If Lost Start Here, the company. So I'll distinguish between the company and the book, the company 10 years ago. And that company has evolved in different ways. But at some point, we thought about making courses. And I had 5 years in, I had returned to the UK from California, where we started the business. I trained as a coach because I wanted to work more one-on-one with people. And as I came out of that training, I kept hearing messages around, do courses, do courses, do courses, create programs. And I was in that sort of very early stages of coaching where I was like, wait, how do I apply this? How does it integrate into my company? What does this even look like? So Amanda and I came up with this idea that we'd noticed that people were feeling anxious and disconnected, uncertain. And a lot of the things that we were being kind of told to seek out weren't quite working for us. So the world of well-being was noisy and overwhelming. This idea about going ever inwards was making us ever more disconnected. And we were longing for something that was more about like getting out into the world or looking at different possibilities for well-being or doing something that felt kinder and more sustainable and more real, like so that we could like meditate or, you know, go outside and see our friends or, you know, do a variety of different things. So we developed this course. And it was this like 12-week course that was like looking at all aspects of life and getting really curious about our lives and really designing what it could be. But as we were doing that, I was also designing a workbook with Amanda. And this workbook just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I was spending more time on that. And I realized how much I really hated doing videos, like doing video lessons. And I was still trying to follow all the advice. And I was like, here's another video lesson, but also I'm spending an inordinate amount of time on this workbook. And the workbook became like 220 pages. And it wasn't really a workbook. It was like a book. I was really proud of that more than anything. And there was a moment that we realized that we'd written the book and that it kind of really existed as its own entity. And around that time that we were there was this recognition of this. I mean, there's this beautiful serendipitous moment, actually, where I had started to look into studying psychotherapy. And I was on a course, like investigating that. And I met this wonderful woman, this extraordinary woman who was curious and interested in the world. And we went out for dinner and, you know, and I knew nothing about her. We'd been together for 12 weeks and we'd gone deep and we kind of, you know, practice therapy on each other. So I know so much about her, but I didn't know what she did. And she didn't know what I did. And it was lovely because we connected on this whole other level. And as we were talking, it turns out that she runs an independent publishing company near where I live that specializes in journals. And I never have these moments in my life. I'm not that person. I know so many people who have these lovely magical moments of connection. I don't have those moments often. And this moment was so lovely. And I very tentatively, because it was such a new relationship, said, oh, I've written a journal. Yeah. And I was like, and it's such an embarrassing moment because what you don't want to happen is that person to say, well, okay, thanks, I'll take a look. And there to be this horrible moment in your relationship. But I just say it. And Helen did look at this and loved it and got it and understood what we were trying to do with it. And the thing that I really loved about it was because so much of our brand is about independent. It's supporting independent places. It's about supporting places out in the world. It's about local. It's about feeling good, but in ways that feel realistic. So her whole brand ethos for her company is about these moments that matter. And so it lined so beautifully. And that's kind of how it came about. So I find it kind of amusing in a way because I'm such a planned person. I'm somebody who is like, I will write the book, I will pitch the book, I will, you know, there's a real clear path and I will follow that path. And this didn't have that at all. It was like lots of meandering twists and turns, which is actually quite beautiful because it mimics the journal itself. And the journal is all about being open to exploration, like just being a little bit more open, a little bit more curious, and to meander through our lives and be okay with getting lost.
Oh, I just love all of that. And there's so many things that you've said. I'm like, oh yes, and what about this? Oh yes, and what about this? But I really love if we can start by talking a little bit more about the journal itself, because it is a beautiful product as well as a useful tool. And I know that the creativity, the look and feel was as important as connection with the reader and the usability of it. So how did you balance that creative and practical side of this beautiful journal?
I think that's at the heart of everything we do. My background is in museums and galleries, and when I was working in contemporary art institutions, everything we did, there would be an idea. So an idea for a show, an idea for an artist that we wanted to work with. But it was really important that we got the design right, that, you know, the visual identity was really strong, that we were conveying a message to our audience, that there were aspects of, like, the aesthetics had to be as strong as the idea. And so it has just been really baked into me. And I was really shocked, actually, when I left the world of culture and the arts and into the wellbeing space, was just how badly designed things were. Like, I kept finding images of, so we work a lot with anxiety, people who are like struggling with uncertainty, people who are feeling burnt out and overwhelmed. And a lot of that imagery is people with their heads in their hands. It's lots of dark blue. It's lots of quite oppressive images. And there's very little play there. And there's very little creativity. And it feels kind of anathema that you would have play in that environment. And play is actually something that we cover in the book, because we have this longing, in a sense, to play, and play can really help us and offer us new possibilities for thinking and for being. So that aspect of play and creativity was particularly important as I moved into this wellbeing space. And then another piece of the book that was really interesting for us is that we had noticed in our work that we are also longing for something more analog, that we are increasingly in online spaces. We are reading on our Kindles. I do it too at bedtime. We're consuming so much information in digital forms. And yet there is this longing for, like, something that's more tactile and more analog. And so the book had to feel like something that you would pick up and feel good. Like, you would want to hold it in your hand and you would want to spend time with it. And it wouldn't be just another thing that I see this a lot in the wellbeing space. We pick things up, we kind of very lightly consume them, we forget about them, we put them down. And we really wanted something that people would want to spend time with. They would want to do the exercises. There's a lot of journaling prompts in there. There's a lot of reflection moments. And they would want to spend that time being in that pause before they then went out into the world and did some of the other activities in the book. So it was really important to us that it had that real, like, you could hold it and love it, and also want to be identified with it too. There's that too, I think, in self-help, where, there are many books with titles that feel uncomfortable. I was talking to Tony Jones on my podcast that was about how sometimes with self-help, we want to kind of hide the titles away. We want to, like, we're sat in the tube and we're kind of like doing this and and there was something about it. I wanted someone to be owning it and saying, okay, this is where I am now. We're all kind of in this together. And there was this identity piece to it too.
Yeah. It's so funny, isn't it? I reflect when you talk. We all used to read paperback books on the train, didn't we, back in the day on our commutes?
Yes.
And I remember when 50 Shades of Grey was published. And there were people that would hide this book within the newspaper. You'd get the Metro on the London Underground and you'd be like, that I bet you any money that's 50 Shades of Grey. Now, obviously, that's not comparable with the Wellbeing Journal, but there is something in being proud of the books that you're consuming, working with, etc. And even, like you say, having a book. These days, you go on a train and everybody's nose is in their phone. And I love the fact that you use the word analog. I use that word a lot in even one device, one task. So how we can stop using our phone as our alarm. It's like, buy an alarm clock. It's just introducing those moments of non-digitization in a world that's become very over-digitized.
It feels really important. So the book has these 10 pathways that people can kind of go on and explore. And one of them is untethering. And so Amanda and I spent a long time thinking about the aspects of our lives that we most struggle with right now, and then finding things that people could do or mindsets they could try on or points they could reflect on. And one of them we call it untethering, because it's all about digital well-being. And we had noticed that in our own lives, we could be thinking about well-being in terms of, mind-body connection, in terms of the quality of our relationships, in terms of getting into nature. But the thing that often can get in the way for us is our digital devices. It's just being on our phones, and we are interacting with our phones more than we're interacting with our lives right now. So it was really important to us that we actually covered that, and we said, what for you, without demonizing it. And that was really important. Amanda really brought this up because for her, she gets a lot out of being on her phone. Like, she's part of the sobriety community. She connects with people through that community, through Instagram and social media. So it wasn't about like, how do we demonize tech? Because tech can actually offer us so many benefits, but how can we find a way to have a healthier and happier relationship with it?
Yeah, it's, as you say, it's not the social connection that it gives us. And even, digital connection, we're recording digitally in 2 different parts of the country. We wouldn't be able to do this if we didn't have the internet and technology and all of those sorts of things. And it's the falling down the scroll hole, isn't it? It's the pull that you feel when you're doing something else of, I just need to check my email for the 15th time this hour. That's the stuff that's causing the digital overwhelm. And that's the sort of disconnection that I think a lot of us are seeking.
Yeah, and it's knowing why you do that too. Like, I think there's an exercise in the book that's about really getting really granular about what is the feeling you're seeking from being on your phone. Like, what is it? Are you bored? Do you want connection? Do you want validation? Are you seeking to be happier? Are you seeking to be calmer? Like, what is that? And does that work? So as you pick up your phone, are you feeling calmer, happier, more connected? And if you're not, where else could you get that in not real life, but offline life? Yeah. And it's really just building that awareness and saying, like, why do I keep showing up in the space that actually isn't doing what I think it's doing for me?
Yeah, absolutely. I could get on my soapbox about that all day, so I'm going to be mindful not to. But I am curious. So the other thing that I've noticed often in the wellbeing space, and one of the things I really appreciate about your brand and how you position the book, is that there's often this ask to do well-being. Thou must have 5 portions of fruit and vegetables a day and walk 10,000 steps and journal and yoga and and it just becomes a lot of stuff. And you've obviously consolidated some options and some thoughtfulness for people in these different pathways. How did you navigate, again, that balance between giving people tools that they need without giving them more stuff to do?
That is such a great question. We thought about that a lot. So we had so many conversations about that because our intention is never to add to the overwhelm. And the idea is not to read the book and think, I'm failing at well-being. So we have this introductory chapter that's all about how well-being is maybe not really serving us and why it's not serving us. And sometimes that can be because we outsource our very desires to experts. So we turn to experts, and in a sense, what we're trying to do is say, tell me what to do. Like, I'm stuck with something, tell me what to do. And I think when you get into the tell me what to do's, then you're diminishing a sense of self-trust. And so part of this at the beginning was really saying, like, how do we learn to trust ourselves more? How do we learn to even hear ourselves more? What kind of messages do we want to be consuming? Why are we even turning to well-being itself in the first place? Like, what do we want this to be for us? You're going to show up very differently if you're burned out than if you're feeling a bit lonely, or if you're feeling anxious, or if you're uncertain. That you'll all be looking for something different. And so much of that first chapter is really getting quite clear about why someone is thinking about well-being in the first place and what they're hoping to get out of it, so that if they do find themselves getting overwhelmed, they have a really clear filter they can run those things through and say, actually, that's not for me. And I think there's a lot of humor in the book too. One of my friends read it and she said, I can really hear you in it, because it's a lot of like, we think we have to world swim to be happy, but it's really okay that you don't want to world swim. Like sometimes I think you have to say these things because the trends are telling us we must and we should and we have to. And I do think there is some pushback saying we don't want to, it doesn't work for me, not right now. So I think there's a little bit of like empowering people to say, no, not for me, not yet. And also really getting curious, I think, rather than, so I think sometimes what we do with well-being, we turn to it and there is a sense that we do the things, and if we don't do the things, we feel bad about not doing those things. And I think when you bring in curiosity, instead of saying like, I must go to the gym 5 days a week, or I'm a bad person, or I must meditate, otherwise, I'm failing in some way, you say, I wonder what would happen if I were to get a bit creative this month. Like, there's a lot more spaciousness in that. There's a lot more like outwardness in that. And you can't fail at that. Like, there's not a moment that you say, oh, I failed at creativity, because there was never that sort of goal in the first place. It was just like some inquiry that says, I wonder what would happen if. And then it's all exploration again.
I'm smiling because the very first book that I wrote just with exactly that intention. I said, I wonder if I can write a full length book and what would happen. So it was not about publication. It was not about winning an award. It was just, I wonder if I can do it and how it will feel and what it will be like. And I did it, and it's in a drawer, in the metaphorical drawer, and it will stay there forevermore. But as an exercise, it was incredibly empowering just to say, I hadn't written a story since I was a child.
Yeah.
And, I was in my mid-30s at the time, and it was lovely. It was incredibly freeing, and it was super fun. And I learned a lot along the way that I now apply to the books that I do publish. And, every now and again, I sort of get that. I've actually got it printed in the loft. So every now and again, I kind of take it out and I'm like, yeah, no, you can use it.
But that wasn't the goal. So I think if you'd set out with that project to say, I have to write a best-selling book, you would have had such a different relationship with that.
Yeah.
And your criteria for success would have shifted that experience for you. And I really like that you start. I tried something similar this year so I think, at the beginning I said like wanting to write more books and really be an author. And so in February, I did something similar where I said, I'm just going to wake up. It sounds awful, but I'm a very morning person, so it's not so awful for me. But I'm going to wake up at 5 every morning, write for half an hour, like not even, because I tried all these things around, like I must clear my mornings and write. I must, all the musts that sort of also come into well-being. And I was like, what is the smallest amount of time I could give to this? And it was half an hour. And so between, woolly around 5, I write for half an hour, and it's to see what happens. And now it's July, and there is something that's really exciting to me. But it didn't start as I have to do this thing. It was like, I wonder what would happen if I was to give half an hour to this every day.
Yeah. I always say Toni Morrison is famed for writing around a full-time job and being a mother. Amazing. And grabbing 15 minutes here, there and everywhere. And I always say, it worked out all right for her.
Yeah, she did fine.
She did all right, and I call it writing in the margins. So wherever those margins are for you, and everybody has the margins. It might be, your kids at swimming lesson and you normally sit on the side scrolling on your phone. That could be your margin. It could be, like you say, first thing in the morning. I'm a morning person too, so it's the first thing I always do. But there will be something in your day and your week that you can grab those little bits of time and, like you say, explore and see what happens. And they compound, don't they, until you get something that you're like, oh my goodness, I've written tens of thousands of words.
Yes, and it is really exciting. And I think that's also was one of the ethos of the book. I think that's what I was saying. The ethos of the book was that it could be really small and incremental. So I think we also have this idea about well-being that it has to be a huge thing. It has to be a huge goal. And particularly now, there's a lot of talk around optimization. So there's a lot of like you have to kind of endlessly self-improve in order to get to best possible versions of ourselves, or whatever that thing would be for us, or the happiest place on earth, or something like that. And actually what I really like about this book is that it's so much about the tiny moments, the in the margin moments, like that, how you can fold things in and thread them in and have it just be a little bit kinder, but also more sustainable too.
Yeah, it's the difference between I have to and I get to.
Yes, it is. Exactly that. Yes.
Yeah, so funnily enough, I work on fiction at the weekends, which again, it has the word work in it. It doesn't feel like work. But on Saturday morning, I wake up and I'm so excited to get back to my novel, because I haven't worked on it all week, because it's been business and non-fiction and, very important things. And I love that too. And there's a little bit of me that just loves writing stories, and it's a treat.
Yeah, it's such a different way of writing, isn't it?
And you can hold two things in your head easier if, again, this is how my brain works. Other people's brains work in a different way, but I need to sort of compartmentalize. So it's like weekdays are for non-fiction and weekends are for fiction. And it's almost like my brain automatically goes, that Saturday is fiction.
I have to do the same. So I really realized that when I hit midlife, that I had to reduce my cognitive overload, because I realized that every time I context switched, it would cost me energetically.
Yeah.
And I was doing that all the time. So because I have this slightly curious career where there are different things, the coaching feels very different than the podcasting, which feels very different than writing, which feels very different than like workshops. Like you're in very different places and different roles in that. And I was finding that I would find it really hard to do a podcast in the morning and then go into being with clients, because you hold space in a very different way.
You do.
And so now what I've done is I've blocked out days. Like I was very I'm getting tired. I went through a period of chronic fatigue about 3 years ago. And that was one of my big learnings, was like, how could I redesign my week so that I have blocked out times and I'm not context switching quite so much.
Yeah. It often comes to us, doesn't it? Particularly in that midlife where we suddenly get to know each other a lot better than we're used to. I interviewed somebody who is neurodiverse a few weeks ago, and she was actually saying the opposite. She has sort of 5 or 6 projects, and she goes where the energy takes her. And then it's almost, the way she describes it's almost like a race. So it's sort of which one's going to win to the publication line. And some of them fall away and some of them continue. And it's a fascinating way of working. And I could never work like that, but it works for her. And I suppose that's the important thing, isn't it? Just listening when your body says these decisions, these changes you're making are tiring you out, then listen to that. And actually, if you need the re-energization of a new project, then listen to that too.
Yes, and both can be true. So, for someone listening, they may hear the way that I work and think, oh, that's really interesting, I could try that, or how the other person works and think, oh, okay, that's not for them, or vice versa. And I think it's coming back to that self-trust and self-awareness that says, there are options here, I get to choose, rather than saying this is not working for me, so I'm a bad person.
100%. And then going back right to the beginning of what you said, I'm sure a lot of people's ears pricked up, particularly if they're newer in practice, of saying, I've started to write a course. Because, of course, you describe beautifully how the journal emerged from this course writing process. And funnily enough, one of my books is the same. I'd launched my practice, Thou Must Create a Course. I created an 8-step course. Nobody bought the course. I was like, why don't I just make this into a book? That would be better. And that was much more useful to people. So again, how did that emergence process work for you?
Oh my goodness. I only now realize just how turned around I was when I came out of my coaching qualification. So I knew exactly why I went into it. We'd just come out of the pandemic. The business was changing. So it started originally as this guide to helping people find places in the world where they could just feel better. It was all about connection. It was all about, finding a school of life or a poetry pharmacy or a self-help club or a silent book club, all these wonderful places we could be together and feel better. And then the pandemic happened. And of course, so many places closed and went online. And we were seeing the need to, again, return to more of this one-on-one dynamics. And I didn't know how to do that. I wasn't qualified to do that. I didn't want to be someone who didn't have the credentials backing me up for what I wanted to do. So when I moved to the UK, one of the first things I did was do my coaching certification. And I chose the one that was the most rigorous. It took me ages. It had to have neuroscience and positive psychology, and it had to just be research backed and all these things. And so I was really clear about what that was to me. And then I did a secondary qualification, which was about emotions coaching, because I'd noticed that was coming up a lot in my practice, and I wanted some more skills around that. So in that sense, it was all very clear. And then I found that as I stepped out of those courses, this odd thing happened of all these messages around selling to coaches, and this idea of what we do, what we should be doing, how we should be making our businesses. And I already had a business. Amanda and I had worked together for a while already. I already had a business. And even then, I kept getting stuck on, I should be doing this, I think. We weren't running courses. We did some workshops. And I found it really hard to keep contact with myself in that period. Really difficult. Because, you just get all these messages of 6-figure salaries and, oh my goodness, or however many K months. And the hustle of it was really noisy.
Yeah.
And I kept seeing my peer group kind of go towards that, back away from, like, we're all in this sort of very confusing moment. And I know what I like to do. Like, I know how I work. But even then, I found that really difficult. And what is actually really beautiful about the book is that I think the thing that I always come back to, so my practice as a curator is really kind of the foundational to how I work, which is like connecting dots and is making frameworks and is taking people on some kind of journey. That's kind of what my training is. And I had to go back to that after thinking. So I thought I'd left the art world behind when I went into this well-being space. I was like, I'm done with the art world. That's not what I do anymore. And it was turning my back a little bit more on the coaching world, not in a horrible, abrasive way, but just in like, parts of this just don't work for me. And turning more towards my curatorial background, that I could hear myself again. And that's when I went back to, like, I like to write. I like to talk to people, which is when I started the podcast. I like to create frameworks for people to come together. So we do workshops, but they're not really workshops. They're more like, I like bringing people in online gatherings where we talk and discuss and we spend time together. It's a little bit more like light touch than a workshop. I'm not the person who will do like a Zoom call and tell you what to do. That's not my skill set. So I just really had to start to hear myself again and bring back the pieces of how I do like to connect and how I think my audience likes to connect too. But yeah, that bit at the beginning was really confusing, I think.
I think a lot of people feel that when they're new. Obviously, it's great that we've got so many new coaches joining the industry because there's a growing need. And yet as soon as you open your doors, you are inundated with people trying to sell you things. And there's an ethical disconnect, I think. We don't train to be coaches to be six-figure people. We train to be coaches to support and serve. And yet we still need to pay our mortgage. So how do you find that balance between the two? It's a very difficult place to navigate, I think.
Yeah, and I agree with that. It is really hard. I think what I've found is that the more I keep hold of my values, so the more that I stay true to what the business is trying to do, because oddly the business is in this wellbeing space, and we have to be really careful too that we don't start talking about, optimization. We don't start talking about the 5 things you must do. Like, we don't start talking about pain points and like in the way that we feel like wounded people every day. So we are both in that space and being very careful not to perpetuate some of the problems of that space. And in the coaching industry too, I do believe it's extraordinary what happens when you are in conversation with a client. Like, I feel the privilege of that every moment I sit down with somebody. And for me, I have to really stay connected to that piece. And then the business side of things then does thrive for me. Yeah.
Yeah. It's that value led, isn't it? Around the service goes first. And if you lead with the service, the business will come. It takes longer, but it's more authentic and it's more sustainable and it's more values aligned for most people.
I think that's true. Like, and so that's another, so we brought, in the book, we brought purpose in. So that's another, one of the 10 pathways is purpose, because we live in a culture that talks about purpose a lot, and having a purpose is important to us, and we all must have a purpose. And I mean, again, I think it's all these wellbeing messages in and of themselves, they feel encouraging and inspirational, and they can have a shadow side to them. And purpose is actually one of those too. And there's some research I think we talk about in the book that's about how the striving to have a purpose can make people feel less purposeful, and how do you navigate that line. And I think that really came through with the company and the coaching practice and my work, which is purpose is one of my values. It's something that's, our mission is to fundamentally help people feel better in their everyday lives. And it's how do we do that in ways that are aligned with, our brand values and within the industry that we operate in.
Yeah. And a real indicator of that is your publication choice. And again, I know we touched on this earlier. You will find the journal on Amazon, and It's actually published by From You to Me and is available on their website, and that's where you direct traffic to as an independent specialist publisher. So I'm really curious how that publication process works. Obviously, you've had this serendipitous conversation, and then the book is available, but what happened in between?
Gosh, so much back and forth. It's not easy because I'm in the southwest of England and my partner is in California. So there was that, and then the publishing team, of course, is in the Bath area, and so there was so the time zone is tricky. So lots of very, very early mornings for Amanda and late nights for me. And Amanda did manage to come out here once, actually, when we're getting close to publication to really, we had a very intense week of reviewing colors and designs and text, and but lots and lots of back and forth. And the book, I mean, it's interesting. You have this, I mean, you know this, you have this idea for the book, and then it meets someone else's hands, like your editor and your publisher and the team that's working there, and they see something different in that. And it's actually, I think that's the gift of working with a really great team, that they see those things. And also you get to really check your own assumptions and biases too, and what those are. And so there were moments that I think we brought in more this idea about mindsets at one point, this idea about how, I think, you know, there's some assumption that I have around we all have a certain mindset, but we don't. And so how can we bring in ideas about growth mindset? How can we bring in ideas about like different ways of being and thinking? So that kind of came in as we were talking about things. And how could we make it more, that sort of it being both. I talked to my a friend about this earlier this week, that it's both a book that you read and both a book that you use. So there's a lot of information in the book. You could read the book, and also in those conversations with the publisher, how do you make it so that it's something that people are using? So how can we bring in more of things to do as well? So that was part of that evolution of the book. Yeah, I mean, I feel really proud of what we created in that, and I think that independent piece is so important. Like, I thought about this a lot in post-publication too, about how we sell it, because of course you get the book and then you're into like, how do we market and sell this? And so it is on Amazon, mostly because the publisher, they have a lot of titles, all their titles go on Amazon. That's just part of the process. And it's available at like Waterstones. But also I have been that annoying person who has been like going into independent bookstores. Apparently don't do this, but I have been doing this. Because we do have this list. So in our guide to life, I have this very long list of independent bookstores that I think people could go to. And so I've been going through that list and saying, I would love it if you stock the book. And people have been, because we've been building those relationships with them over years. So it's at like Daunts and Pages of Hackney. It's in the Poetry Pharmacy, which was one of the first places we showed in our guidebook. I think they're extraordinary. And so it's kind of in the independent spaces that we have long been supporting. And I'm trying really hard to make sure that happens, and that this is a book that is in the places that we support as well. And that's really important to me too, because I grew up around those spaces. So I grew up, like, my dad is like a wholesale food distributor. So as I was a child, we would make deliveries to groceries and bakers, like at the time that the high street was really flourishing. And I learned very early on to love the high street. I learned how important it was and how it connects us in our communities. And so in the marketing of the book, it's really important that we continue to support those spaces, and that if people are able to, and I totally get the cost difference, but if you are able to buy the book from an independent, that is an act of service too. Like, one of the pathways in the book is kindness. And I think it is an act of service and an act of kindness to support your community. And I think we do that through buying the books in independent bookstores. And it may be a few pounds more, but that has so many benefits you can't even possibly begin to trace. Like, it's just extraordinary how, when we support our local communities, how we all thrive. And hopefully part of the book is that as individuals, we thrive and we're happier and healthier. But what's really important to Amanda and I is this sort of collective piece that we all thrive and we all find ways to support each other's well-being too.
Yeah, that's so powerful. I think a lot of aspiring writers that I work with, a lot of the work we do at the beginning is the purpose behind the book. Why they're writing the book, because again, it can be very different depending on if they want to use it as a business card versus if they want to use it as something that's a legacy item. They're very different paths to publication that are appropriate or suited to those types of books. And it's almost like, I don't know if you did that work consciously or not, or whether it was just serendipity that said, oh, actually, this is this, or whether you'd have gone out seeking for alternative publication routes. Maybe the universe intervened so you didn't have to. But there is something beautiful in that alignment of everything you do being, yes, we're there if you want to buy us there. Yeah, of course, you can go to the supermarket and buy it, or you can go to the independent bookshop and have a coffee with the owner. And, that there is something different about that, and that belonging that we're all seeking, that's where it is. It's not on the one-click buy.
Yes, and I think that's true. I think it's in I do, there's so much magic. I mean, it's such a sort of fluffy word, but there is something about wandering into a bookstore and feeling calmer and more connected. And I say this as somebody who the places in the world really matter to me, and they matter to my mental health. And I may be unusual in this, but part of the book is finding those places that do help you feel better. Yeah. So for me, if I'm feeling anxious or disconnected or uncertain, I will go to a museum. I will go to a bookshop. I will spend 20 minutes wandering the shelves and I will feel better. I don't know, like there's a magical calmingness about it for me. Like I just feel like the world got bigger again in ways that feel expansive and spacious and more generative. And for Amanda, it's different. Like Amanda, for her, when she's feeling like sort of disconnection, she gets to live music spaces or she gets to the ocean because of where she lives. And I do think part of my hope for the book is that people get to find those spaces for themselves. And maybe it is a local independent bookshop that you get to reconnect with and support and make your own again.
Yeah. I call it filling the creative well.
Oh yeah, I like
those places that are, sometimes they can be different, but normally they're like at least a couple of miles away from your home. That they go and they refill you in all the sensory ways.
Yeah, I really like that. And if we don't, I mean, this is the thing too. So part of our research for sort of a different project was about the number of spaces that are closing. Like so many of these spaces, it's so hard to survive. It's so difficult. So if you don't support your independence, they're not there anymore. So I guess part of this work is making sure that they do get to thrive too, and they do get to exist. And if we can do a tiny piece of that, I'd feel really happy about that.
Yeah, no, I think that's amazing. I'm conscious we could talk all day and we're about to come up on time. And so that's probably a natural place for us to bring the conversation to a close. But I have one more question before I ask you my final question. And that's just, what advice would you give to anyone listening that's aspiring to write and is listening to our conversation today?
I listened to a really great podcast called I'm Writing. I think it's hashtag I'm Writing. That's it's KJ Delantonia. She also has an amazing Substack too. And she always says, get your bum in the seat, right? And I have learned that if I'm waiting for the moment when I feel like I want to write, that moment often doesn't come. And there is something about just making it an everyday practice. I think there is such it's such a gift in that, because there's also, you get the muscle memory of it too. So every day now when I sit down to write, almost my brain's ready to go. I have got rid of all that kind of procrastination gets in the way. Like, I think so often that's the thing, isn't it? So I'm not waiting for a feeling. I'm not waiting for the right moment. I have one spot in the house that I only sit in that place when I write. So there's a sort of real muscle memory to it. But I think it is just sitting down and writing. It's very unsexy, but I do think it's that. Yeah.
If the muse knows that you're going to be there at 5 a.m., the muse will arrive.
I really believe that, actually, yes.
Claire, thank you so much for your generosity today. If you can share where people can find you, your services, and your beautiful book.
Yes. Okay. So there are a few places. We have a website, If Lost Start Here. You can find out like many links to where to find the book. So there's links to Amazon and Waterstones and the publisher, but also to Bookshop, which is a great place to support independent bookshops. Or do go into your local bookstore. If they don't have it, they can order it. And I know that feels really annoying, but they can do that. And it's really good for them to do that too. And then I'm on Substack. So I have 2 Substacks. I write about everyday well-being at more good days. And I also, we haven't really talked about this, but I also work with people on having a better relationship with their feelings. So whether that's anxiety or grief or overwhelm or disconnection or burnout. And I talk about that at It's a Lot Actually. So as in like, oh, it's a lot actually, like as in life. And I have a podcast, which is called A Thought I Kept, which is really wonderful in terms of my guests, maybe not in me, but it's all about the one I did at Stays when the rest just didn't. And we're on Instagram as well. So lots of places to find us and to connect, and do also just reach out and say hi. I love talking to people in our community.
Claire, thank you so much. That's been brilliant.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been really delightful. Thank you.
Wasn't that a wonderful conversation? So much there to reflect on. Next week, we have the footnotes, and I'll be sharing all about newsletters, why you need one, how to start one, and what to say. I'll see you for the next chapter. Thank you for joining me today. You can get the show notes and your free guide to publishing options at coachwrite.co.uk. Remember to subscribe and leave a review on your podcatcher of choice. Your words can make a difference. A review can too. If you'd like to connect, find me on LinkedIn, O'Neill Helen, that's ONEILL, or on Instagram at coach_write. I'll see you for the next chapter.